Hey everyone, Virginia McClain here with chapter 19 from Victoria Marmot and the Meddling Goddess. Don't know if I'll get all the way through this chapter before my 3-year-old comes home, but I'm gonna try. And when last we left our hero, Vic was, sobbing in the middle of her kitchen floor, naked because she just shifted back from being a snow leopard. And she had turned into a snow leopard in order for Seamus and Soledad to explain what it was that she had forgotten. So here we go, Victoria Marmot and the Meddling Goddess, chapter 19. I remembered him, I cried, standing up and reaching for the kitchen counter, ignoring the pile of my clothes that lay on the floor beside the stool. Good, then the spell is gone. No, I shook my head, grateful that the headache still seemed to be gone, even though I was back in human form. I mean, I remembered him before, when I was a kid. They tried to charm us all. They did charm us, but it didn't quite take on me at first. After they took him, my parents tried to get him back, tried and tried, but nothing worked, and then we moved. And my parents told me I couldn't talk about Trevor anymore, and then they had us all charmed, all of us, and they stopped talking about him. It wasn't like he was dead. They pretended that he had never existed, that I'd never had a brother, that my twin didn't even exist. But it didn't work on me. Not at first. And I kept trying to make them remember, and they kept telling me I was making up stories, and my breath caught in my chest as the memories hit me one after another. They sent me to see a psychiatrist. They had me treated, and I stopped. I didn't want them to put me away somewhere, and I didn't want them to be so mad at me all the time, so I just stopped talking about him, and eventually I couldn't remember if he was real or not. He felt more like something I'd made up. My mom always talked about the day they tried to take me, as though that was all that had happened, as though they'd never taken Trevor. Of course, because he didn't exist. And then my breath hitched on a sob before I managed to speak again. I forgot about him. I stopped talking about him, and slowly I started to believe he'd never existed. 8 years of memories. How could I forget about him? How? How did I forget my twin brother? Seamus patted my back and caught me as my legs started to give out again. I let him support me for a moment before I settled myself on one of the stools. Then I remembered that I was still naked. I ran the back of my wrist across my face to get the worst of the tears and snot, then grabbed my clothes and rushed upstairs to put them on again. When I came back downstairs, Seamus and Sol were standing on opposite sides of my kitchen island, sharing what looked like an awkward silence. So, do cats and dogs not get along in the magic world either? I asked, trying to lighten the mood. Sol merely shrugged in response, but Seamus just grinned. I like you just fine, he said. The sincerity of his smile made me smile in return. You're all right in my book too, Seamus, I said, bumping shoulders with him on the way back to my tea mug. At least for now. Don't show up in my room uninvited or anything, though. Seamus growled, even though he was still in human form. No worries on that front, he muttered. I sighed, taking a sip of my tea as I sat down at the kitchen island once more. Vic, when you talked about your brother disappearing, you kept saying they took him. Do you know who they is? Seamus asked, pulling up the stool beside me. I shook my head. Not really. My parents knew, I think, but I don't think they told me, or if they did, I'm not sure I understood. I was only 8. Sol, you said you know where he is. Do you know who took him? Sol nodded. I do. He's in Bolivia, and I know who put him there and why. Are you ready to hear any of that? I took a deep breath, letting the long suppressed memories of my brother resurface. Letting the kidnapping come back to me was hard. It was difficult to relive the terror I'd felt as an 8-year-old watching my brother get taken away. Shotgun, Trev called, rushing towards the car, the way he always did, as if Mom ever let either of us ride up front. Trev, wait up, I called from behind him, tugging Mom along so she would hurry up. Trev and I were both excited to get home and test out the new gaming console we'd just gotten. No more playing at Frida's house. We bowling nights could happen in our very own living room. Come on, Mom, this is going to be the best birthday ever. Mom laughed as I tugged her along, dragging her feet, probably just to give me more of a challenge. Get away from me! My head shot up, and Mom and I were both suddenly running flat out towards the car. 2 men had grabbed Trevor and were wrestling him into a nondescript white van. Trev wasn't going without a fight, though. He was flailing and kicking like a wild animal. I heard one of the men grunt in pain as we got closer to the car. Then Mom turned into the biggest bird I'd ever seen and launched herself at the men holding Trevor. "Let go of my brother!" I screamed, over and over again, while the 2 men holding him shoved him into the back of the cargo van, and my mom screeched and threw herself at them repeatedly. A 3rd person emerged from the front of the van and came running towards me then, and I screamed until my lungs were on fire. Mom dove at the woman, just before she reached me, digging her talons into the woman's face, causing her to scream even more loudly than I had. The woman turned and ran, probably because the white van was pulling away. Mom flew after it, throwing herself at the windows, but the woman turned back in my direction, and I ran away from her, screaming for help. I didn't see what happened to her, but I heard her scream as I dove into the elevator that would take me back to the main floor in the parking garage and the entrance of the mall. Mom landed next to me a moment later. As the doors closed, she returned to her human form, naked and sobbing. I was crying again by the time the memory was over, but I took comfort in knowing that I was about to find out who those people had worked for. Finally, I nodded, wondering how much time had passed since Sol had asked her question. "Yes, Sol, I would like to know who took my brother." Just as Sol opened her mouth to answer, I heard a knock on the door. I glanced at the clock on my microwave. 2:41 p.m. "Who the hell would that be?" I asked, standing up and heading for the door. "Wait!" Sol shouted. "It could be a trap." "A trap?" I asked, still walking toward the door. Who would come to trap me in my own house? Hell, who even knew where I lived? I walked to the door, worried that it might be Eric, but deciding that just in case Sol wasn't crazy, I would check the peephole before I opened it. What I saw made my brain skip so hard that I opened the door before I'd even had time to think about it. "Hey, Vic," Trevor said, standing with his hands in his pockets, looking for all the world like a 6-foot-tall, dark, handsome, unsure puppy. I could barely see through all the tears, but I launched myself at him before he had a chance to back away and wrapped him in a bone-crunching hug. "Trev, holy shit, is it really you?" I pushed back, still holding his shoulders, and looked into the bright golden eyes that looked so much like mine, except for the color. His eyes looked darker, in a way, like they'd seen a whole lot of suffering in the past 10 years, but, well, they probably matched mine in that respect. So many things about him reminded me of what I saw in the mirror every day. Hell, he even wore his black hair long like mine. I hadn't seen him in 10 years, and he'd changed just as much as I had in that time, but I would have known him anywhere. I wrapped him in another hug, and this time he actually wrapped his arms around me in return. "I missed you too, Vic," he whispered into my hair. I held on to him for another minute. I couldn't help myself. It was like the longer I held him, the more real he became. He even smelled right. Eventually, I pulled back again and smiled at him. "You should come inside," I said, gesturing to the door that still hung open behind me. "This is your house, too." Trev shrugged and followed me inside. I couldn't let go of him completely, so I kept his hand in mine. It was warm, dry, and lightly calloused. "Trev, this is Seamus. He's a werewolf from my English class," I said, wondering when my life had turned into a fucking J.K. Rowling novel. "And this is Soledad, a werepanther from, well, I'm not entirely sure where, but I think she was about to explain." Trev's grip on my hand tightened, and he drew me behind him. "She doesn't need to explain," Trev said, his voice dropping. "I know exactly where she's from." And then my brother burst into flames and threw himself at Sol. That's the end of chapter 19. So I think that's going to be it for today. I'm going to go work on some other books, but yeah, we're getting to the heart of things here in book 1. And I hope that these chapters are entertaining and help bring a smile to your face. I mean, I got a little choked up there in the middle, but hopefully it's not making you sad, or only in a good way, if that's possible. Anyway, yeah, I'm off to go do some other things. I hope to post more chapters later in the week. Wait, it's almost Friday. I hope to post more chapters next week, I guess. But 3 chapters today I feel pretty good about, and hope you guys enjoy them. And that's it. We'll see you in chapter 20, probably on Monday, hopefully. Maybe even tomorrow, if all goes well.